And thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead today, the high cost of the holidays in the market and on the road. It has many wondering, are we returning to pre-pandemic levels? And Pageant comeback. We've got a look at the return of an Israeli tradition. Plus, the history of the Thanksgiving holiday from a Pilgrims view. We take a look at the documentary that tells the story of their passion for religious freedom. And it's a family affair. The Big Red Dog on the big screen.
You know, this movie is about big love. This is literally a big red loving dog.
Our sit down with Regent University graduate and actor Tony Hale, who plays the villain. All these stories and more are next.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And we begin this half hour with holiday turkey and travel set to be among the most expensive on record. The national average for a gallon of gas is $3.40. That is up roughly $1.30 from this time last year. President Joe Biden hopes to ease the financial burden by releasing 50 million barrels of oil from the nation's strategic petroleum reserve, though analysts aren't sure we can expect much different at the pump.
Once people have decided they're going to go, they go. They just figure out another way of budgeting in the cost.
It is not just gas prices. The Farm Bureau projects Thanksgiving dinner for 10 people will cost 14% more than last year, averaging more than $50. With the COVID-19 vaccine now widely available, many families are hoping for a traditional Thanksgiving, but doctors are warning not to let your guard down. One doctor says the best thing you can do is make sure everyone in your household is vaccinated. Other recommendations include wearing masks if needed and regularly washing your hands. And if you do plan on traveling, you should also check out the infection and vaccination rate for that specific community. Far more people will be celebrating Thanksgiving with family and friends than last year, with many Americans opting to fly. The TSA expects the Sunday after Thanksgiving to be the busiest travel day of the year, with more than 2 million passengers.
So it's going to be about twice as busy as it was in 2020, pretty close to where we were in 2019 for Thanksgiving.
Experts also say, especially this year, get to the airport early and be patient. Lines are expected to be long, and there could be staffing shortages at the airport as well. In other developing news today, frightening new numbers reveal a staggering increase in America's drug epidemic. The Centers for Disease Control reports an estimated 100,000 Americans died from overdoses in 1 year. That's a record high. As medical reporter Lori Johnson shows us, the increase is being blamed on fentanyl-laced street drugs and COVID-19 shutdowns.
From March 2020 to April 2021, more than 100,000 people, or 274 a day, died of drug overdoses in the United States. That's close to 1/3 more deaths than just the year before. Drug overdose deaths have been steadily climbing the last 20 years, but nothing like the acceleration we've seen lately. The main culprit, fentanyl, often secretly added to other drugs, catching the user off guard.
It's really just in everything, in the drug market. It's kind of a scary time.
The Virginia Medical Examiner's Office says 3/4 of overdose deaths involved fentanyl, almost all accidental.
This whole drug overdose epidemic has changed, but it's increasing significantly in the last year. And I'm not sure if we're going to really see anything slow down in the near future.
A synthetic opioid, fentanyl, is 100 times more powerful than morphine, so potent that the equivalent of a couple grains of sand can kill.
It is cheaper than many other substances, so it can be added to stretch out. If somebody has a certain amount of cocaine, for instance, if they add fentanyl, they can increase the volume at a very low cost.
It's also added to pills like Xanax, oxycodone, and Molly.
How easy is it to spot fake pills that are bought on the street?
Almost impossible. What we call a pill press is what dealers are using to take the powdered substance and turn it back into a prescription-looking pill are incredibly sophisticated.
In addition to the fentanyl-laced street drugs, pandemic closures of rehab centers also contributed to the high number of overdoses as recovering addicts relapsed.
Then they were alone. And that isolation is the worst thing to happen for someone who struggles with substance abuse.
Some drug prevention organizations are taking action to stop future overdoses by giving known users two things: fentanyl test strips to detect the substance in other drugs, and Narcan, the opioid reversal spray. While users are also advised to use the buddy system, the #1 recommendation remains get treatment.
But we've seen a lot of people get better, mostly, and I have to be honest with you, it's through the power of Christ. When they give their life to the Lord and they say, look, God, I'm surrendering my life to you. I call it submitting to the process.
He recommends the 12-step program, which involves believing God can break the chains of addiction. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
For several years, an Israeli foundation has held the Miss Holocaust Survivor Beauty Pageant. As Chris Mitchell now reports from Jerusalem, while the COVID-19 pandemic put that pageant on hold, it recently made a comeback.
86-year-old Selena Steinfeld won the 2021 Miss Holocaust Survivor Beauty Pageant. The pageant celebrated how these women not only survived the horrors of the Holocaust, but passed on a legacy of life and hope to future generations.
Probably the most beautiful evening I've had in a really long time, celebrating their, we spoke about the cliche of like our inner beauty surpasses our outer beauty. It's true tonight.
The Friends of Zion Museum, founded by Mike Evans, hosted the event.
And these Holocaust survivors, their parents weren't killed over land. They were killed because they were Jews. So this inspires the younger generation, but it also gives them with optimism.
The beauties of today honored the survivors of yesterday.
It's very important to me also because I'm a third generation from both of my sides to Holocaust survivors. So it's like a closure to me.
Organizers hosted the contestants for several days, and professional makeup artists hampered the survivors. To them, it was like a dream.
Crazy, like in a movie. Crazy, everything is crazy. I don't believe it's true.
The survivors got to tell their story during the broadcast, seen in several countries, online, and covered by dozens of media outlets.
I remember everything as if I can see it now. They expelled us from the village, and we went on death marches. Thousands and thousands of people. I had typhus, and they sent my mother and me to a partisan hospital in the woods. But there was snow, and we didn't have shoes. We went on foot. I had a fever of 40 degrees. My mother raised us in ditches where there was a lot of lice, and we cried day and night because we had nothing to eat.
But they survived the horrors and raised up another generation.
She's my mother, she's my queen, and she's my survivor.
Leah Schneer's mother was a twin who survived the gruesome experiments by the infamous Dr. Josef Mengele at Auschwitz.
I was born as a miracle because nobody knew at that time what Mengele put in their bodies, what injections, so that she gave birth to a healthy child. That's a miracle.
Many of the survivors thank God.
But there is a God in heaven, and he protected me. God helped me, and I was fortunate. I'm in the Holy Land, in Israel.
Some felt the survivors reflected the words of the prophet Isaiah, who wrote, "To give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning."
I don't forget this. Only I forgive.
Schneer served as one of the judges.
I see all these beautiful, beautiful Holocaust survivors women, and I said, for me, nobody has to win. They all won. For me, everybody is a beauty queen.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Still ahead, the hardships and challenges the Pilgrims face to start the nation we love, told in a fresh new documentary on what things were really like for them. Stay with us. As we celebrate Thanksgiving tomorrow, we remember how God brought the Pilgrims here to the New World with a passion for religious freedom. Mark Martin spoke with the creator of a new documentary about the true story that goes far beyond what's taught in the history books at school.
A new documentary called The Pilgrims is out, and it tells the true story of the Pilgrims and how God brought them through some very difficult times to found our nation. Jerry Newcomb, who produced the movie, is here with us, and he joins us now to tell us more about it. Jerry, tell us about Providence Forum and your inspiration for creating this new documentary on the Pilgrims.
Well, Providence Forum is a division of D. James Kennedy Ministries. It was actually originally founded by Dr. Peter Lillback, and he gave it to the ministry. And Dr. Lillback and I wrote a book together on the big, thick book on the faith of George Washington. But this movie is all about the Pilgrims, and it aims to tell the true story and all the difficulties that they faced. And what we did was we relied heavily on original research sources and original research, so we'd make sure we were totally accurate in what we told, and a lot of amazing things about the Pilgrims.
What surprised you the most as you learned about them?
I think the fact that 95% of the Indians in the area where they settled had been wiped out in a plague 3 years before the voyage of the Mayflower, and in the providence of God they came there. And so they were not wiped out by unfriendly Indians. And instead, they were able to meet friendly Indians, and together they made a treaty of peace. And together they enjoyed fellowship as they celebrated the first Thanksgiving, which was 400 years ago, from this very autumn, 400 years ago. And they sat down and they enjoyed a time of worshiping God and 3 days of fun and games and great food.
Tell us about the faith of the Pilgrims.
Well, the faith was the whole motivator. They just wanted to worship Jesus Christ in the purity of the gospel. When they read the Bible for themselves, they felt that the Church of England, this is going back 15 years before, was not really living up to what the Bible says. So they ended up basically getting out of England so they could be at least tolerated in Holland. And then they wanted to be totally free once they heard about Jamestown and that was a permanent establishment. That's where they set out to go, just so they could worship Jesus in the purity of the gospel. And because they were blown off course, they ended up making an agreement for self-government under God, a written charter based on the biblical concept of covenant. It's called the Mayflower Compact, and it was the first major step towards the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution 150 years later.
How much of the Pilgrims' faith is being taught in schools today?
Very little. Very little. And it's really a shame because that's what motivated them. If you take away the Bible, you take away the Pilgrims. You take away their motivation for coming and to endure all the difficulties that they had to go through in order to be able to worship the Lord in the purity of conscience. And so it was a Bible-centered commonwealth. They even said, for example, in the Mayflower Compact, we having undertaken a voyage for the glory of God and the advancements of the Christian faith.
Still ahead, why those who want to abolish Thanksgiving have got it wrong, as we continue our interview with Jerry Newcomb about the Pilgrims, plus their socialist experiment, and what the Pilgrims might think about challenges to religious freedom today. Back down with more of Mark Martin's conversation with Jerry Newcomb about the true story of the Pilgrims. And we ask what they may have thought about the challenges to our freedoms and faith today.
What do you hope folks take away from your documentary?
The truth and the full picture of things. I think, unfortunately, what's happened is some people even today are calling for an abolition of Thanksgiving. And I think this is a tremendous tradition, Thanksgiving is. And it's not correct that the Pilgrims, as some people have said, they were bad to the Indians. No, the Pilgrims were great with the Indians. In fact, if other settlers after the Pilgrims had been like them when it came to their relationship with the Indians, it would have been a better history. But as far as the Pilgrims are concerned, they had a good Christian witness. But I want people to realize what they sacrificed and how much they contributed to America. I don't know if you know this, Mark, but they even experimented with socialism, which was imposed upon them by the people who lent them the money. And after a couple of years, they said, no, this is not working. And so Governor Bradford said, wow, we've got to get rid of this. And then he had individual land ownership, and then the prosperity started to come.
What do you think the Pilgrims would think about challenges to religious freedom today?
I think they would be aghast. One of the guests in our program, and by the way, we have Dennis Prager, Bill Federer, Alveda King, but one of our guests is a direct Pilgrim descendant. In fact, his great, going way back, was William Brewster, who was the de facto pastor of the Pilgrims. And this gentleman, William Wrestling Brewster, a contemporary, he said in our film, he said, suppose one of the children of the Pilgrims were to say, do I have to go to church? He said, could you imagine what it would be like if one of the Pilgrims were asked that question? And they might say, listen, you don't realize all the things we went through and all that we suffered through so that you can go to church. It's a great privilege for us to have religious freedom and freedom of conscience, and we need to protect that. And even the founders, jumping ahead 150 years later, they talk about the importance of the freedom of conscience. Frankly, religious freedom is what America is all about. In fact, when the founders gave us the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, the very first freedom mentioned, the first liberty, is freedom of religion.
Quickly, how can folks get a copy or watch the documentary, The Pilgrims?
Well, what we're doing is we're making providenceforum.org the first post on providenceforum.org, and you can see all the information, including ways in which you could stream it through salemnow.com. But providenceforum.org is the main means by which people can get information on how they can get the video or how they can stream it and so forth.
Okay, Jerry Newcomb with American Foundation Films and the producer of The Pilgrims. Thanks for your work, sir. Blessings to you and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too, Mark.
Coming up, he's the bad guy in Clifford the Big Red Dog. We chat with a Regent University grad in Studio 5. Right after this, stay with us. Clifford the Big Red Dog is going strong at the box office. It's a big hit with families. Actor Tony Hale, who's a Regent University graduate, plays the villain in the film. Here's part of our Studio 5 interview with him.
You may not believe it, but there is magic all around us. There are times it can be hard to find.
Did you bring your garbage to school?
But sometimes the magic finds us.
Look at you.
What's Tony Hale's, I'm assuming, childhood Clifford connection?
Yeah, I mean, Clifford was created 1963. I was born 1970. So, like, I feel like Clifford was always around.
Clifford?
Tell us about your role. You play a bit of a sinister character in this film.
I play the evil guy.
And action.
He starts to exploit. He wants to exploit Clifford, and I love playing the villain.
What's the bigger story you think this particular film tells?
I love that question.
Oh, he's so cute and so tiny.
And so red.
I love that.
There's a scene in the movie where Emily, the girl, is holding Clifford as a little dog. And Clifford, they're both in very unique situations where they feel kind of like an outcast.
Yeah.
And Emily loves the dog, and it's the love that makes the dog grow.
How big is he gonna get?
Well, that depends, doesn't it?
On what?
On how much you love him.
And I just feel like, man, in today's world, there's so much divisiveness. There's so much social media, like judgment and criticism. And the more that we can kind of celebrate the differences of others, the more that we can have empathy, the more that we can listen, the more we can cross the aisle and begin to have discussions and celebrate things. I think that is where growth is going to happen.
Unbelievable.
Good boy.
Really taking that step to love and taking that step to accept, that is where change is going to happen. And obviously this is like children's programming, but it's a program that I think a lot of adults need to check into.
Absolutely, absolutely. Paint a picture for me of what it's like on the set.
You know what? I can just listen to his heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you're doing something like this, you have no idea what's going to turn out. You have no idea. There's this scene at the end of the movie where he's chasing through traffic, and it's crazy. It's these special effects people, I am blown away by them. They're so incredibly gifted, and it's really eye candy. It's beautiful.
Was there a clincher or something that cinched it for you that made you say yes to this project?
You know, this movie is about big love. This is literally a big red loving dog, and it's also family entertainment.
Yeah, so why don't we get you on the scale here, bud?
It's tough to find things that the adults enjoy and the kids enjoy. So to be able to go to the theater and have that experience and the message, I think it's actually really good timing for it.
And you can catch Studio 5 on this station or the CBN News Channel this evening, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. Time now for your Wednesday word, and today's word is gratitude. Know this: fill your heart with gratitude, and you will find there is not much room for anything else. And if you struggle to find something to be grateful for, you can begin with the very air you breathe. Be grateful you have the ability to breathe. With that word, I encourage you to make this a wonderful Wednesday, and be sure to have yourself a wonderful rest of the week. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, God bless, and be sure to have yourself a great Thanksgiving.